Hi class, and welcome to my presentation on Chapter 2, The Self. We begin with self-awareness. Socrates stated that the unexamined life was not worth living. To examine one's life is to look at, observe, and scrutinize what goes on both outwardly and inwardly. Being self-aware is understanding who you are, what you like, what you dislike, how you behave, and then judging those attitudes. Is being conscious of your feelings, your attitudes, your actions, and your behaviors. Being aware of your own individuality. Social comparison is part of this. It's comparing our behavior to the behavior of others. We attempt to model behavior of people that we admire, and we also tend to avoid behaviors that we despise in others. The question is, do you feel superior or inferior when you compare yourself to others? So we're going to do a quick written exercise. I want you to answer the following questions about yourself. Just take a minute to write down your responses. How would you describe your general moods or feelings? Are you a happy person, a sad person? Are you usually depressed? Are you usually optimistic? How would you describe your appearance? Would you say that you are beautiful? Would you say that you're ugly? How would you describe your social traits? Are you a social person? Are you more of a person that likes to stay inside and not be out with other people? How would you describe your talents? What talents do you have? Would you say you are a talented person? How would you describe your social roles? Are you a mother, a father, a brother, a leader? Your beliefs, your religious beliefs, your political beliefs, and your physical condition. Would you say that you're healthy? Would you say that you're fat? Would you say that you eat healthy? Different things like that. So if you just take a second and write those things down, then this list is probably a pretty good descriptive summary of who you are. Now I want you to take your list, and if you need to pause this presentation to finish making your list, you can. So I want you to identify your top 10 characteristics and number them in order of significance to you. The things you like the most about yourself, put first, and then the things you like least, put on the bottom. So what are some things that you could never let go of? And I want you to circle those. And then I want you to underline the things that you'd really like to let go of. This kind of is just an exercise of being self-aware and understanding who you are. Another name of kind of what we just did is called self-concept. This is an individual definition of who you are. It is a stable set of, well, a relatively stable set of perceptions you hold about yourself, or an overall perception of who you are. It's based on your attitudes, beliefs, and values that you have about yourself. From the time you are very young, you base your beliefs of yourself on what others tell you or how they act towards you. This is referred to as the looking glass self, or reflected appraisal. And the person that came up with this theory is called Charles Cooley. How we feel about ourselves is based on what we think other people think about us. So as we interact with other people, they give us feedback, and that verifies who we are. For example, when you're little and your mother tells you that you're cute or that you are a fast runner, then you begin to label yourselves according to what other people have said about you. So think about this. Has anyone ever told you who you are? Has your mother or your family or your friends identified what they think you are, and have you taken on those labels? How do people let us know when they think that we are good or bad or ugly or cute or funny or whatever it is that they tell us? It happens lots of different ways, and as you just think about that, you'll start to think of specific examples of that in your own life. So how is self-concept developed? It is developed based on your past failures and successes, on messages that you receive from others that make you either feel really good at something or really awful at something else. It is also whenever someone confirms what you already believe about yourself, that's self-verification. When you focus on perfection, it can lead to negative self-concept, and society expects you to meet certain standards, and that can affect how you feel about yourself. If you're actually meeting those standards or you're not meeting those standards, can affect how your self-concept is developed. The reflected appraisal, when we reflect what what we think other people think about us. That's confusing, I know. And then the social comparison. There's three basic areas of self-concept. The first one is cognitive competence, how we feel about our academic performance and how capable we are of doing things. Then the next one is social competence, how we feel about our relationships and our family and our friends. And our physical competence, how we feel about our physical activity and our level of health. How we view ourselves also reflects how we feel regarding relationships and our level of attachment. And we can either feel completely comfortable in relationships, or we can be completely fearful of that. And there's all different levels. And to read more about that, it's in the book on page 49. Self-fulfilling prophecies. These are predictions about our future that cause us to behave according to that prediction. They can have negative or positive results. They can be self-imposed, or they can be imposed by others. And you can have influence over whether or not these are positive. Let me explain a little bit more. So an example is if you predict you're going to fail this course and you actually do it because you have told yourself that. Other times are when somebody else, this would be called the Pygmalion effect, when your parents tell you that you are really good in school and you're really good at something in particular, and then you become successful at that because you've been told that you're really good at it. Or the other case scenario is when somebody tells you that you're really bad at something. So you start performing poorly in that area of your life because you believe now, according to that person's perspective, that you are terrible at that. So you have some control over whether or not you are going to believe these things that are being said about you or that you say to yourself. I hear a lot of people talking about positive statements, making positive statements to yourself, positive affirmations. And the power of those positive affirmations. If you take the time to say good things about yourself, I know it can sound ridiculous, like the movies where they're talking to themselves in the mirror and saying, I'm beautiful, I'm wonderful, and people like me, or whatever it is. But those kind of things really do have an effect on how we think of ourselves and our self-esteem and our self-concept. And so be careful what you allow yourself to believe and try to make sure that those kind of things are positive. Okay, so the next thing is the self-esteem. This is the overall value or worth that we give to ourselves. Kind of the equation right here for self-esteem is your characteristics. So some of those things that you listed on your piece of paper would be your characteristics, and how you feel about them. So your characteristics plus how you feel about them equals your self-esteem. Your self-esteem affects everything in your life. Your communication, your relationships, your outlook on life. If you have a high self-esteem, you're a happier person, you're more satisfied with your life, you have positive and happier relationships, and you tend to have better performance in your life. And when you have low self-esteem, you end up putting yourself in these destructive cycles where you're really not making the progress in your life that you feel like that you could be, and you're not happy. Or maybe you're not as happy as you could be. And so it's important to recognize what your self-esteem is and your self-concept. So one of the things that affects that, obviously we talked about how other people help shape our self-concept. And there's two basic type of people. There's ego boosters and there's ego busters. Ego boosters are people that have helped enhance our self-esteem or our self-concept by acting in a way that made you feel accepted, competent, worthwhile, important, appreciated, or loved. And I'm sure we can all think of somebody in our life who has said something or treated us in a way that has really impacted our lives for the good, for the better. And I can just remember one person in my life that I can share with you. It was my fourth grade teacher. When I very first got glasses when I was a little girl, I was so nervous to go to school for the first time. And my fourth grade teacher just told me that I looked so sophisticated in my glasses, and she really made me feel better about wearing them. And then there's ego busters. There are people who have acted in a large or a small way to reduce our self-esteem. And I'm sure we can all think of examples of people who have helped shape us negatively as well as positively. So the next thing we're going to talk about is self-discrepancy theory. This was developed by a man named Higgins. And this is when we compare two mental standards: our ideal self versus our ought self. The ideal self is all of the characteristics we desire and want in life. And I put a picture of a person with a superhero cape because that ideal self is not really, it's this image of somebody that might not even exist. And so we need to be careful that our standards aren't too high there. And then we have our ought self. This is the person others want and expect us to be that we're not always going to be. And so those self-discrepancies that we have, that we are not being that ideal self or we are not being that ought self, can really affect our self-concept and our self-esteem. So how do we change our self-esteem? It begins by changing our self-concept. And here's some ideas of how to do that. You need to have realistic expectations of yourself. No one is perfect. So set some realistic goals for yourself. Don't set things that nobody could accomplish. Have some realistic perceptions of yourself. Are you being too harsh on yourself? Do you judge yourself too harshly? Are you expecting things that nobody could do? Are you recognizing your strengths, or are you focusing on your weaknesses? And we need to focus more on our strengths and less on our weaknesses because, like I said, no one is perfect, and we need to expect that same thing of ourselves. Okay, so now maybe we've decided that we're willing to make some changes so that we can feel better about ourselves. And how do we change? So we set some realistic goals. We can ask other people for help, and we can observe how other people are being successful in their lives. If there's one particular area that you feel like you need to work on to feel better about yourself, then maybe you could observe how somebody else is being successful about that. Not in a self-comparison way, but in a way where you could actually benefit and say, oh, they're doing this. I'm going to try that and see if it works for me. Expect that you are going to do great things. Have positive self-fulfilling prophecies. Tell yourself that you're going to do great. Have that positive self-affirmations. And surround yourself with ego boosters, and do likewise. Be the ego booster. Recognize your influence on other people in creating their self-concept. Okay, the next concept is face. These are strategies people use to influence how other people view them. There's two sides. There's the perceived self, the person you really are, and the presenting self, the one that everybody else sees or that you're trying to show everybody else. This is called face or face work by Goffman, and can also be referred to as a mask. Impression management. When you lose face, it's when you're doing something that contradicts the image that you're trying to portray. And when you save face, you're trying to alleviate the situation where you lost face. The book recommends that you acknowledge what happened, apologize, and move back to maintaining that face again that you want. So the next thing they talked about was online self-presentation. And you need to be careful how you present yourself. And even more, you need to be careful of the idea that everything on the internet is not true. And I love that commercial where they say everything on the internet is true with that French model, and I'll post that video so that you can watch it if you haven't already done so. But be careful that you're aware that other people aren't who they say they are necessarily, or they're trying really hard to present only the best about them. Okay, the relational self. Social penetration theory. This theory is like an onion. It says that people, as we get into relationships, we disclose ourselves and each of our layers, and we reveal personal information about ourselves. And we need to be careful that we don't do too much or too little, and we need to respect other people's personal information.